Swinburne University of Technology.
Hello, this video is designed to give you some advice around how to do citations of references in the text of your essays. Essentially, there are two main ways to cite references in the main text of your essay as opposed to the reference list. I'll deal with that separately in a different video. One is where you mention the author explicitly by name as part of the text of the sentence. This is sometimes called giving the author prominence. The second way is when you just cite the reference without mentioning the author's name explicitly as part of the sentence, sort of in passing. Now, there are two main cases to deal with when you are citing references. One is when you're referring to the cited work, whether it's a book, an article, web page, whatever, as a whole, or secondly, if you're referring to a subsection of the whole work, whether you're paraphrasing part of it or making a direct quote from it. In the case of quotes, there are short quotes and long quotes, and these are handled slightly differently, and so I'll give you some examples of that. The first example is an in-text reference using the author name. Richard Slaughter's written a book called The Biggest Wake-Up Call in History, which speaks about the challenge to our civilization. So if I wanted to cite that in the text, the simplest way of thinking about it, firstly, is just to say, well, how would I write it without a citation? I would say that Slaughter has written about a major challenge to our civilization. And if I wanted to make the citation of what that was, I would just give the year, because I'm referring to the whole work. It's a book published in 2010. So it's fairly straightforward. Slaughter, 2010, has written about a major challenge to our civilization. Another example is Meadows, Randers and Meadows, who in 1972 wrote The Limits to Growth and who updated that in 2004. So once again, if I'm making an in-text reference using their names, the simplest way to think about it at first is without any citation year. So the sentence without any citation is simply Meadows, Randers and Meadows recently updated their initial modelling on the dynamics of the Earth system. And to make the reference, I simply give the year of that work, which in this case is the year 2004. So an in-text reference using an author name is fairly straightforward. Write the sentence and then stick the appropriate year in there if I'm referring to the whole work. A second example is how to do in-text citation in what you might consider to be the more usual or parenthetical way that you're probably more familiar with. And so in this case, I have some sample text, and it is that a number of authors have written about the current state of the Earth's biosphere and the implications this has for the civilization it supports. Now, the two lots of references that we have so far are Meadows, Randers and Meadows, 2004. So I'll open a parenthesis, put them in, and Slaughter, which I separate with a semicolon, and I add in a citation to Slaughter, and close the parenthesis. A couple of things to note. Meadows, Randers and Meadows, inside brackets, uses an ampersand character for and, whereas outside the brackets it uses the word and. Second point is that you separate the references with a semicolon. So this reference separates from that reference in all cases with a semicolon. The third case is that the sentence punctuation appears outside of the parenthesis. It is incorrect to render it in this way, where you have the sentence finishing and then the reference. The citation is part of the sentence, and so it should be considered part of the sentence. Now let's look at an example of using a short direct quote from an author. I'd like to quote something that Richard has written in his book. So I've written some introductory text in the sentence here. Slaughter has remarked that. Now the quote that I want to use is actually here. This is a scan from page 1 of Richard's book. And the quote that I want to use is this: "The challenge to civilization is simply stated. Humanity has collectively outgrown its world." So I need to add that to my sentence. So I've cut and pasted in. I also need to indicate that it is a direct quote. So I need to enclose it in double quotation marks. I need to show you which work it's come from. In this case, it's the book with publication year 2010. And I also need to show where in that cited work this particular quote can be found. It's on page 1. So what I've got here is a sentence that says that Slaughter, 2010, page 1, has remarked that, and there's the quote. The point is, you can see that it's a direct quote, you know the work that it's come from, and you know where within the work it's been quoted from. And that's the rule of thumb for all direct quotes, and indeed for paraphrasing of passages. The last example I'd like to show you is of using a long direct quote from an author. In this instance, if we look at Richard's book on page 1, here is the quote that we've just used. The challenge to civilization is simply stated up to here, but I'd actually like to use all of this text down to the sentence, this is no one's fault and everyone's. Now this is a longer quote, and so this is dealt with in a slightly different way than short quotes are dealt with. The way it's done is, once again, within our sentence text, I've introduced it, Slaughter has remarked that, and then I paste in the text that I want to quote. Now, in order to show that this is quoted text, what I'm doing here is indenting it. So the quoted text is now indented with respect to the text that precedes it and the text that follows it. This indicates that it is, in fact, quoted text. This block of text is quoted, which is why this is sometimes called a block quote. You don't need to use double quotation marks here because the indentation is what shows that it's quoted text. Now, as before, I need to indicate where it's come from, the cited work, 2010, and here I'm giving the page number information about where that quote is found. And so that's one particular way of doing a block quote or a long direct quote from an author. Another way of doing this is very similar. Once again, I cut the text in, I indent it, and I need to indicate where it's come from that work and that location within the work. These two ways are essentially equivalent. If you like, you can choose one or other, but having chosen one, please be consistent and use the same approach each time. Okay, have fun with your citations.
This has been a Swinburne production.